It is January 2026, and the world is still reeling from the echoes of a daring US-led military operation in Caracas that resulted in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. It was a lightning strike, the kind of action usually reserved for Hollywood movies, and it marked the beginning of Donald Trump's second term with a massive bang. But just hours after this victory, Trump, in an interview aboard Air Force One, shifted the focus to something completely different: Greenland. He reiterated that the United States needs the island for reasons of national security. "We need Greenland for a national security situation. It is so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships everywhere," he said, echoing statements he first made back in 2019 during his first term. The following day, Stephen Miller, one of Trump's closest advisors, known for his hardline stance on immigration and foreign policy, doubled down on the rhetoric during a CNN interview. He openly questioned the basis of Danish sovereignty over the island, suggesting that Denmark's control is tenuous and that the US, as the leading power within NATO, has an implicit right to intervene. The real question is, by what right does Denmark secure control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is the basis for holding Greenland as a Danish colony? Miller stated during a tense exchange with anchor Jake Tapper that the United States is the power of NATO. This rhetoric is not new. Trump already flirted with the idea of buying or annexing Greenland in 2019 when he canceled an official visit to Denmark after Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the proposal absurd. But now, in 2026, with Trump back in power and the world even more polarized, the administration's implicit message is clear. If Denmark cannot adequately protect the territory, why not transfer it to the US? These statements were received like a bucket of cold water across Europe. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen reacted harshly in an interview with Bloomberg, warning that any forced attempt by the US to take over Greenland would mean the end of NATO. "I believe the American presidency should be taken seriously when it says it wants Greenland, but I will also make it clear that if the United States chooses to militarily attack another NATO country, then everything stops, including NATO, and with it, the security that has been established since the end of the Second World War," she said. European leaders such as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer came to Copenhagen's defense, emphasizing that any decision regarding control of the territory rests exclusively with the people of Greenland and Denmark. Starmer, in a statement to Parliament, highlighted, "Sovereignty is not something negotiated in tweets or interviews. It is a fundamental principle of international law." But before we dive into the implications of this potential crisis, let's go back to the basics. What is Greenland? Why is it so valuable? And why does it belong to Denmark? Greenland is the world's largest island, covering an area of about 2.16 million square kilometers, larger than Mexico, yet with a tiny population of approximately 56,609 inhabitants, according to 2023 data from Statista and Worldometer. Almost the entire island lies above the Arctic Circle, meaning much of it is covered by a permanent ice sheet, the second largest in the world after Antarctica. This ice sheet contains about 8% of the planet's fresh water. The population is sparse, concentrated mainly in coastal villages, with the capital, Nuuk, home to about 19,600 people. Greenlanders are predominantly Inuit, descendants of indigenous peoples who migrated to the region thousands of years ago. Their culture is rich in traditions of hunting, fishing, and adapting to the extreme Arctic environment, but it faces modern challenges such as the impact of global warming, which affects traditional seal and polar bear hunting. The connection with Denmark dates back centuries. Danish colonization officially began in 1721 with an expedition led by Norwegian-Danish missionary Hans Egede, who founded a colony near present-day Nuuk. Egede aimed to convert the Inuit to Christianity and establish trade in furs and ivory, but the European presence on the island is even older. Norwegian Vikings, led by Eric the Red, settled there around 1000 AD, though these colonies disappeared in the 15th century due to climate change and conflicts with the Inuit. In 1814, following the Napoleonic Wars and the Treaty of Kiel, Denmark maintained control over North Atlantic territories, including Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Iceland, the latter becoming independent in 1944. During World War II, with Denmark occupied by the Nazis in 1940, the United States temporarily took control of Greenland to prevent it from falling into German hands. The US built air bases and weather stations crucial to the war effort, such as Thule, now called Pituffik Space Base, which served as a refueling point for aircraft and a lookout for U-boat submarines in the Atlantic. After the war, in 1945, the U.S. returned control to Denmark but maintained a military presence through bilateral agreements. In 1953, Greenland ceased to be a formal colony and was integrated into the Kingdom of Denmark as a county. This marked the beginning of a gradual decolonization process. In 1979, home rule was granted, allowing Greenlanders to manage affairs such as education, healthcare, and natural resources. In 2009, the Self-Government Act expanded this autonomy, recognizing the right to self-determination, including the possibility of independence via referendum. Today, Greenland has its own parliament and government handling internal policies, while Denmark manages defense, foreign policy, and currency. Danish sovereignty is recognized internationally, including by the U.S., which signed treaties confirming this in 1916 as part of the purchase of the Danish Virgin Islands, now the U.S. Virgin Islands. So, is Danish sovereignty weak, as Trump and Miller suggest? Legally, no. It is a solid arrangement backed by international law and the UN. Politically, Greenland relies on Danish subsidies. About 60% of its budget comes from Copenhagen, totaling billions of kroner annually. However, operationally, especially in military terms, there are challenges. The Arctic is vast, remote, and expensive to patrol. Denmark has a limited presence. Its Arctic Defense Force includes the Arctic Fleet, with vessels like the Knud Rasmussen, and recent investments in drones and radar. In 2021, the Danish government announced a 1.5 billion euro package to bolster Arctic defense through 2026, including more personnel and equipment. However, Trump exploits this perception of vulnerability, pointing to the growing presence of Russian and Chinese vessels. Why is Greenland so militarily valuable? Its location is geometrically perfect for global strategy. Situated at the hinge between the Arctic and the North Atlantic, it controls routes connecting North America to Europe and the North Pole. This has implications for missile early warning as part of the NORAD system, air and space surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and the protection of undersea internet cables, which carry 99% of global data traffic. The ultimate symbol of this importance is Pituffik Space Base, operated by the U.S. since 1951. Renamed in 2023, it houses radars for the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System, which can detect intercontinental missile launches from Russia or China within minutes. The base also supports U.S. Space Force operations, including satellite tracking and orbital debris monitoring. As global warming melts Arctic ice, with sea ice coverage decreasing by 13% per decade since 1979, according to NASA, new maritime routes are emerging, such as the Northern Sea Route along Russia and the Northwest Passage in Canada. These routes can shorten trips between Asia and Europe by up to 40%, significantly reducing time and fuel. A study by the Arctic Council states that ship traffic in the Arctic increased by 37% between 2013 and 2023, with major implications for trade and security. Trump mentions Russian and Chinese ships, and there is truth to that. Russia has been reactivating Soviet-era Arctic bases since 2014, following the annexation of Crimea, investing heavily in nuclear icebreakers and military exercises. In 2023, Russia and China conducted joint patrols in the Arctic, including the Bering Sea, signaling a growing partnership. China, which has dubbed itself a near-Arctic state since 2018, is investing in scientific research and infrastructure, such as the Kvanefjeld mining project in Greenland. Reports from 2025 highlight that Sino-Russian cooperation in the Arctic is pragmatic, focused on energy and shipping routes, yet marked by mutual distrust. Russia views China as a long-term competitor. For the U.S., this represents a threat. Chinese vessels could spy on undersea cables, and Russian submarines armed with hypersonic missiles could challenge American naval superiority in the North Atlantic. But Trump's interest goes beyond security. As I mentioned, there are trillions of reasons Greenland is incredibly rich in critical minerals. A 2023 survey by the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland identified deposits of rare earth elements: lithium, graphite, nickel, zinc, gold, diamonds, iron, and tungsten. The rare earth elements alone are potentially worth trillions of dollars. Greenland holds 25 of the 34 critical minerals listed by the European Union. As melting ice exposes new areas, mining is becoming viable, though it remains controversial due to environmental impacts. China dominates 80% of global rare earth production, so the U.S. sees Greenland as a way to diversify supplies, aligning with the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which incentivizes domestic and allied mining. U.S. companies such as Energy Fuels are already exploring partnerships, but barriers remain, including Greenlandic regulations that banned uranium mining in 2021 due to radiation concerns. Another factor, climate change. The Arctic is warming 3 times faster than the global average, according to experts. This opens maritime routes, but also causes coastal erosion, permafrost loss, and species migration. For the Inuit, this threatens their way of life. Ice hunting is declining, and communities like Qaanaaq face relocation. Greenlandic independence is a live debate. A 2008 referendum approved greater autonomy, and 2023 polls show 60% of Greenlanders favor independence. Yet they remain economically dependent on Denmark. If independent, Greenland could enter into agreements with the U.S., similar to the Compact of Free Association with the Marshall Islands, guaranteeing American defense in exchange for military access. Now the big question, if Trump attempts a forced annexation, does NATO end? The North Atlantic Treaty, signed in 1949, has Article 5 at its heart. An armed attack against one or more of them shall be considered an attack against them all. But it was designed for external enemies, like the USSR. There is no explicit mechanism for an ally attacking an ally. A hypothetical scenario of an American invasion, say troops in Nuuk raising the US flag, would be an unprecedented crisis. As explained in analyses by the Brennan Center, Article 5 does not mandate automatic military action. Each member decides its own response. Denmark could invoke Article 5, forcing allies to choose sides. This would implode trust. Europe, already skeptical of Trump after his threats to withdraw from NATO in 2018, could fragment. Countries like Poland and the Baltic states, which depend on the US for protection against Russia, would be deeply divided. 2024 reports warn that such a rupture would weaken global deterrence, directly benefiting Russia and China. Trump has alternatives that don't involve force, strengthening the existing partnership via Pituffik, negotiating mining agreements, or supporting Greenlandic independence through bilateral pacts. In 2019, Trump offered financial aid to Greenland, but it was rejected. Analysts suggest a post-independence association agreement where the U.S. provides defense and investment without formal annexation. In summary, Trump's interest in Greenland is a combination of security, minerals, shipping routes, and competition with rivals. But a forced annexation would come at a high price. He would gain the island but lose Europe and global credibility. The post-1945 world order built on alliances would collapse. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Does Trump have a point, or is this madness? If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more geopolitical analysis. See you next time.